This video will show you how to replace the front CV axle on a Pontiac Grand Prix. This will be located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, remove all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and we can get the wheel off of here. Now that we have the wheel out of position, let's use a spacer and one of our lug nuts to hold our brake rotor in place. Once you've done that, that's going to prevent the rotor from falling off. We need to remove our caliper next. Let's have a look along the back side. As we look along the back side of the caliper, we can see our two 15mm caliper bracket bolts. I'm going to fully remove my first bolt, just a quick inspection, and I'm going to start it back in a couple threads, preventing the caliper from falling down as I continue on fully removing the next. Now, as we remove our caliper, have a quick look at our brake pads. Confirm they're not worn at an angle or damaged in a way that they are not usable, in which case you'd want to replace them. These look fine, so I'm going to set this aside, putting no pressure on my flex hose. Now we're preparing to remove our brake rotor, so we're going to remove our lug nut and our spacer. Now this rotor is ready to come off. Commonly, it might be stuck in place up against the wheel bearing hub. If that's the case, you could carefully tap on the hat of the rotor along this area, but do not cause any damage to the braking surface or to your lug studs during the removal process. Remove your brake rotor, give it a quick inspection, we'll set it aside. We're moving along to removing our axle nut. We'll be using a 34mm socket. I'm using an impact tool to remove this mounting nut. If you are attempting to do it by hand, you might find that this wants to spin on you. If that's the case, you want to try to prevent that. You can use a pry bar diagonally past the studs down towards the ground. We'll use some penetrant along the axle and the wheel bearing hub. A hammer and punch directly in the center of the axle shaft. Let's tap on this, breaking the axle shaft free from the wheel bearing. Now that we have movement from there, let's make our way up towards the top of the steering knuckle. Now we're looking at the area that meets up against our front strut assembly. We're going to be using a 21mm for each of our two 21mm mounting nuts. Once you've removed these, we're going to have to tap the bolts out of position. Just be careful not to cause any damage. Just a quick inspection of that mounting nut. Now, when I tap these out of position, typically I like to have the end of the nut flush with the end of the bolt. Now I'm going to carefully start tapping on this. The bolt itself does have some splines. I like to have the mounting nut on here. It helps prevent damage to the bolt, but it also makes sure that the bolt does not fly out while you're tapping on it. We'll use some penetrant and a hammer. A couple light taps here. There's one. Now I'm going to do the same for the other. As we remove the final piece of hardware, keep in mind this knuckle may want to pull out and away from the vehicle. Be extremely careful. Let's separate this. Now we're pressing the axle out through the back side of the wheel bearing. Of course, I do have some rust on my application and some corrosion, which is hindering my ability. We'll just pry it out as necessary. Continuing on, we're following the front axle all the way into the transmission. In this area, we need to separate the axle from the transmission housing. Now there are axle removal tools. You could also use a long prying device. I'm just going to use a pry bar. Of course, we have a collection receptacle under this area so we can collect and recycle all fluid properly. You may find that fluid comes out of this port. Now I'll reach inside. I'm taking hold of the axle. We'll slide it out of position. There it is, friend. Now, prior to installing any brand new part, of course, we want to make sure we clean and inspect our mounting area, so we're looking deep inside at the transmission. Looking in this area, we can see the inner portion of our axle shaft. This is actually part of the transmission. We just want to give it a thorough inspection, and of course the seal. This is your axle seal going around it. Make sure it's soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged. As you can see, I do have fluid making its way out, but that's because I removed my axle. I'm going to use a clean rag, no detergents. Just a quick wipe. And now, of course, a thorough inspection of that seal. Still soft and pliable. Nice. Now we can get our axle in place. We're going to align it with the shaft we can see protruding out from the transmission. Now you may find you have a hard time pressing this in. You could tap on the far end with a rubber mallet. If you find you have a hard time installing the front axle, try rotating the lock ring. So, with a little bit of work, as you can tell, we do have that in place. Now we can't stop there. We're going to hold on to the inboard side of the axle on the metal portion of the flange, not on the boot. We're going to attempt to pull this out and away. It should not slide out of place. If it does, it's not locked in properly. Yeah, that's good. While we're still in this area, let's clean down our mess. Now it's time to get the axle shaft inside along the rear of the wheel bearing. We want to slide it straight through the wheel bearing, and then we're going to take our steering knuckle and pull it up towards our front strut so we can install our hardware from the front towards the rear. Okay, let's pay attention up along the top here. This is looking good. 2 pieces of hardware. Line it up, slide them through. Now what I'm attempting to do is tap the splined area of each one of the bolts into the steering knuckle. That's going to help prevent these from spinning while we continue along the rearward side with our 2 mounting nuts. Let's make our way there next. Now we can install our 2 mounting nuts on the rearward side and we'll torque them to 89 foot-pounds. There's that one. Let's make our way up to the next. And my torque wrench, 89 foot-pounds. Now prior to installing our brake rotor, we need to make sure we clean and inspect our wheel bearing hub surface. Use some parts cleaner and a wire brush. We're attempting to remove any raised surfaces. Let's apply some anti-seize to the wheel bearing hub mating surface. Just make your way around. A thin coating should do. So now we're looking at the back side of our brake rotor. We need to make sure we clean and inspect the area where our wheel bearing hub would sit. We'll use some parts cleaner. Let's get our brake rotor in place. Once you have it on there, we're going to hold it in place using a spacer and one of our original lug nuts. We're moving along to installing the caliper next. The caliper is going to slide over the brake rotor and we have to install our 2 mounting bolts. We'll bring this down into position. Now we're going to start in both of our mounting bolts. Once they're both started in, we can snug them up and then torque them to 133 foot-pounds. Now let's remove our lug nut and spacer. Now it's time for the axle nut. When you go to install it, you may find that this wants to spin on you. You can prevent that in different ways. You could either press on the brake pedal, you could also use a pry bar directly down towards the ground at an angle, or you could use a screwdriver inside the fins of the rotor, down along the bottom area here. That will help prevent it from turning if you rest it against that caliper. Time for the axle nut. When we go to install the axle nut, you want to make sure you use a hand tool for this. We're not using an impact tool. That could cause damage to the bearing. There we are. Okay, let's get this to an area we can torque it. Now I'll torque that to 118 foot-pounds. Let's reinstall our wheel. Start on all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. Once you have them all started on, snug them up. We'll get the wheel back on the ground and then torque each lug nut to 100 foot-pounds. Now that I have the wheel back on the ground, I'm going to be torquing each one of my lug nuts to that 100 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. torqued. Okay, let's make our way up inside the engine compartment so we can check our transmission fluid level. As you make your way under the hood, you can see where the master cylinder is. This is our transmission dipstick. Let's go ahead and remove that. I'm just going to wipe it off. And now we're going to have a close look. Looking right where my thumb is, you can see a hatched area. What you need to do is start the vehicle, let it run and get up to normal operating temperature. While on a flat surface, check your transmission fluid level. If it looks like it's at the low point of the hatches or all the way down off of the dipstick, you need to add some. The fluid you would use would be Dextron 6. To add fluid, just use a funnel directly inside this port. Once you're done, make sure you reinstall your dipstick. Okay friend, we finished our installation. Of course, you want to make sure you pump up your brake pedal till it's nice and firm. You're going to take your vehicle for a road test, make sure you have no fluid leaks from your axle seal, and get yourself in alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.